Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight because just taking a little time out to look at our own consciousness, become insightful, even for a little while, has immense benefits in our lives. Because ultimately we are conscious beings. And being aware of how our consciousness is working and the fact that it's malleable, there are ways in which we can amend our consciousness and align it for harmony, is also very helpful, as there are a lot of influences in our lives these days, aren't there? Please say yes. It's not just me. And I'd like to know, just so I can get a little context, what brought you here tonight? Just, we'll take a sampling if a few of you, like maybe say 3, could volunteer. We'll pass the mic around and just say, what inspired you to come? There are a lot of things you could be doing tonight, but you decided to come here and sit. So if you just say what it is that inspired you, that'll give us a little context to the whole thing. Yes, please.
My friend Robin invited me tonight. I was very glad to go to a class at Stanford on stress management, and I'm glad to be here. I'm looking forward to what I can learn.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Robin. Yes, please tell us. Right to the left, right back here. She's got her hand up. He'll get you the mic in 7 seconds or less, or your money back from this seminar.
I teach meditation, mindfulness, stress management to military veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan with severe PTSD.
Oh, how lovely.
So I've never gone to a lecture yet where I haven't learned something that might be valuable with my patients.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. What a nice practical application for meditation. Okay, 2 more here. We'll come right back to you.
I think the word stress today attracts a lot of attention because we see children, right from children to the old people say that they undergo a lot of stress on an everyday basis, and the reasons are different for different people, but then it's become like a common phenomenon. So I think that's what attracted me to the discourse today.
So because you noticed it even in children?
Stress is something really common today, and
common.
Reverse engineering stress.
Yes.
The word stress always attracts a lot of attention today.
Oh yes, okay, good. The general topic is compelling because it's so prevalent nowadays. That is stress. Maybe the topic too. 1, 2.
My name is Robin. I teach 4th grade, and I was born in Vietnam, and my grandmother always took me to the meditation gathering when I was young, and now I hope to teach my students the meditation, so I go to many classes as I can.
What a nice service you're doing. Thank you very much.
My name is Sergio. I'm here a PhD student, and I'm originally from Colombia. I grew up in Colombia, came here to the US 3 years ago, and having come to the US, I realized that stress sometimes is part of the culture. Back in Colombia, I used to work exactly at the same rate that I would work here, but I wouldn't feel the same amount of stress, and I wouldn't see the people around me feeling the same amount of stress. So I realized that if I'm going to live here, managing those things need to be something that I do actively, that I pursue actively.
No wonder you got so far. Very precise, determined, and organized. Thank you very much for being here. Well, that gives us an idea. It gives me an idea. One thing that I'm hearing is that many of you are already acquainted with techniques that help to transform stress or to avoid the kinds of stress that can be debilitating, and you're already teaching others that. And some of you have realized that it's prevalent and looking for perhaps a few ways to deal with it, to think about it. So that's helpful. Thank you very much. This is my perspective is coming, first of all, philosophically, from my teacher who came from India, and he especially taught from the Bhagavad Gita, which is a widely accepted spiritual literature, the likes of Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Albert Einstein, the Beatles, Tupac Shakur. They all had something good to say about Bhagavad Gita, and there are many, many more. There are over 400 translations of it, just in English alone. And it's a commonsensical literature. So I'll be relying a little bit on it tonight. In fact, one of the key verses that I identify with being the main way in which to look at the origin of stress, I'll be talking about tonight. And also we'll do a little group meditation tonight too, because having a practical experience is always the best, because there's a way in which we are conscious living beings, and it's something I'll point out from the Bhagavad Gita, and we can become conscious of ourselves. We can become conscious that we're conscious, as opposed to being aware of the changing world around us, what to speak of the changing mind within us, and being caught up in it. We can be centered beyond the movements that tend to be very disturbing to us. So first of all, I'll just give a little framework from the Bhagavad Gita philosophy, because it can be helpful in understanding the overall idea of where stress comes from. And this is my attempt to look at the different parts so we can look at it analytically. So the Bhagavad Gita describes how there are different energies in this world. That's not a big surprise, but it gives categories. Some are higher energies and some are lower energies. So as an example of the lower energies in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Bhumir apo analo vayu kammano bhudirevacha ahankara ityam me bhina prakritir ashtada. So this is a list of the what are called the material elements, gross and subtle. And they are earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. So these are listed as gross and subtle material elements. And in the next verse in the Bhagavad Gita says, Aparem tastvanyam prakritim vidime param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam daryate jagat. And that is beyond these material elements, which are considered to be an inferior energy. There's a superior energy, which is the conscious living being that's animating matter. So as an example of this, the body itself is a biological robot. If you stare in a mirror for a while, you'll notice that your eyes open and close, especially if you turn the light on and off or up and down. The lens will move, and you'll think, boy, that looks just like a camera lens. And it is just like a camera lens. In fact, there's a whole science now of mimicry of nature and developing all kinds of products. The ear, mechanical. This elbow, very mechanical. There are pumps, levers throughout the whole body, and it's decidedly mechanical. But what about the mind? Well, the Bhagavad Gita says the mind is also mechanical, although it's much more subtle, just like software in a computer. There's a hardware, which is like the body, and then there's the software, which is like the mind. And now there's a description of a hierarchy. So lowest of all is the senses. So the Bhagavad Gita says, Indriyani priyanyahur indriyebhye param manaha manasastu para budhir yo budhe paratasvisa. So this is mentioning the hierarchy. Lowest of all are the senses. Like, please note where you have senses. Who can point to some of them? 1, 2, they're all around the head mostly. 3, conveniently grouped right here. And so throughout the philosophical literatures of India that go into the science of yoga meditation, there's description of the body being a conglomeration of senses, really. So lowest of all is what's called the indriyas, or the senses. And above the senses is the mind. And above the mind is what's called the buddhi, or the intellect. And they all have different functions. And above the intellect is what's called the atma. Everyone please say atma. The atma is the non-material particle, or the superior energy that I described earlier in the list of all the different elements. And it's the conscious being. And the theory propounded in the Bhagavad Gita is that Atma is categorically different from all the other energies. And not only that, it's what's animating the body, it's illuminating the body, and it's what's making the mind work. So when that illuminating force, the animating feature called the Atma, which by the way is said to reside within the heart chakra, leaves a particular body, what happens to the body quite rapidly? The body, yeah, be more specific. She said it dies, but...
Yeah, the body dies. The body is lifeless.
It becomes lifeless, and then... Any biology students in here? It decomposes. There's rigor mortis decomposition. It happens rather quickly. So this is the change that takes place. So the Atma within the body is in a particular environment and can be influenced by that particular environment, especially when the Atma identifies with it. And so one of the ways in which we experience stress can be explained with a simple analogy, and that is if you go to a movie. Anybody here ever been to a movie? Do they still have movie theaters? Or is that gone now? Anyway, obviously there are lots of places you can watch a drama, right? More than ever before. So let's just say you went into a movie theater, if there still are movie theaters, and the lights go down and the projector turns on and there's an image on the screen. And what's the scenario? Somebody tell me.
It's dark.
What is it?
It's dark.
Okay. There's people in it, right? And they start interacting. They make friends. And we feel like, well, that's nice. They made friends. And then what happens? Then they fight. Then how do we feel? A little annoyed or maybe disturbed or whatever. And so many dramatic things can happen in a movie because you can basically make anything happen in a movie, in a drama. And when it does, is it possible that when you're watching the movie that you become really absorbed in watching it and you experience for yourself emotionally what's going on with the characters? Possible? Has it ever happened to you? Come on, admit it. You cried once. When I was a kid, there was a movie called Born Free, and it was about some lionesses that had been captured and then released and so forth. And I remember as a kid, I watched that movie, I think, 6 times, and I think I cried during the movie. And you know, I was absorbed in it. I was really thinking about it a lot. And maybe some of you have had that experience also. Not with Born Free necessarily. That was a long time ago, but with that sensation of being absorbed in the movie, and then perhaps the lights come on and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, it was just a movie. Or there may be a lingering feeling there as well. But you would be able to, at any time, if you took it upon yourself to turn around and look and say, it's just light coming out of a box and it's being projected on the screen and it's not really happening to me. It's just going on here, but I'm identifying with it, and therefore I'm becoming, I'm moved by it. Either I'm happy or I'm sad, and so forth. Let's take another scenario that may be closer to home, more practical. Anybody drive here today? Okay, you drove here. Let's just say you parked out here. And we're sitting here calmly talking, and all of a sudden we hear a car speeding down the road and careening, and then we hear a car getting sideswiped. There's metal glass sound, crashing sound. And it sounds just about where you parked, right? Is Robin?
Yeah.
Where Robin parked. And so now how does Robin feel? Anxious, okay, that's a very good term, and it's general, and it relates to stress, doesn't it? Okay, but tell me more about what she's going through. Be very specific.
She's very worried that her car wrecked.
Okay, there's worry, but what happens when you're worried? Starts imagining, it's all in the mind. Anything happen physically?
Yeah.
Huh?
Tension.
What?
Muscle tension.
Muscle tension, what else?
Feeling restless.
Restless.
Heart's beating fast.
Heart, now you're talking. Tension, heart actually beats faster, right? You get in stress, anxiety, worry, fear, heart speeds up. What else?
Short breath.
Short breath. Any perspiration?
Possibly.
Possibly, yes. These are all reactions to something we just heard. Now Robin runs to the window and she looks out and she sees, well, it actually wasn't my car. What is your name?
Alka.
It's Alka's car. Now, how does Robin feel?
Really
Sad.
All of a sudden her heart calms down almost immediately. It slows down, perspiration evaporates, the stress goes away. And how does Alka feel? Maybe they trade places with the feelings. Now, of course, there's cars all over Northern California right now, and I guarantee you a lot of them are getting sideswiped at this very moment. And how do you feel about it? You look cool as cucumbers. You're not really worried about it, right? Because you don't identify with it. One of the reasons is it's not your car. Of course, if someone called you from somewhere far away and said, your car just got hit, then how would you feel? Like Robin and Alka felt when they heard their car got hit. But the difference is it's because you're identifying with it. And so the difference between the movie when you're feeling this anxiety and stress is, and when you're not, is that at one moment you're identifying with it and you enter into it. So in a similar way, we enter into our life situation. There's our life, which is us. We're conscious beings, and we're actually observing what's going on in the world around us. But when we identify with it, then it becomes ours. And there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita that describes this. Jyato vishayam pumsam sangasteshu vijayate. Sangat sanjayate kama, kamat krodha vijayate. So this verse says, when you look at something and then you make a union with it through considering it to be yours, then it becomes an anga, or a part of you. And now you're connected to it. Now it becomes a problem for you. And this is one of the ways in which we develop stress, is by identifying with certain things and thinking these are my things. Of course, there's lots of cars. They're all made out of glass, rubber, metal. And we're not so worried about them. When it's my car, then it becomes an issue for me. And that conception of my car is in my mind because I've identified a particular object that's mine. So the Bhagavad Gita would say, the same with the Yoga Sutra and all the other literatures on yoga and meditation, that I'm riding in a car. This body is a vehicle. And I'm one of the influencing factors that moves it in various directions. But when I identify with it and I say, this is my body, then when something happens to my body or anything in relationship with my body, then I feel it moves me in a certain direction, and I can feel stress from that. So this is the framework for understanding how to analyze stress, how to process it in a different way, rather than just reacting to situations that happen and the changes that inevitably go on in my life. I become a witness to it. I'm observing it and I'm seeing how things are moving about. And that includes the mind. Now, I'm going to quote one more verse from the Bhagavad Gita, and then I'll take a few reflections just so we can amplify this particular section of the discussion. And then we'll do a group meditation that relates to that is a practical way in which we can sort of observe ourselves as different from the corporeal body that we are riding around in. Does that sound reasonable? Okay. So first I'll quote the verse. It says, and this is a description in this metaphysical literature which describes the symptoms of a person who is said to be self-realized. And so that was a question that was asked from the student to the teacher. It said, well, so what is the symptom of somebody who's attained a level of self-realization? And the answer comes from the teacher. Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partamanogatan atman yeva anatushta stita pragnas tadochite. The stita pragna means somebody who's situated in an insightful form of consciousness, where he or she can analyze actually what's going on and not become, as we just described, various scenarios, carried away by it, and therefore carried down the stream of success, of stress. And so it starts off, prajahati yada kaman, says that the mind is like a factory, and it's constantly producing ideas, scenarios, attachments, desires, and it's got like a conveyor belt. Imagine a little factory and there's a conveyor belt coming out, and it's constantly putting out these products from the mind. They're coming off the conveyor belt. Now, the verse says, prajahati, the person who is actually situated in insightfulness is able to withdraw him or herself from the temptation to grab all the products that are coming off of that conveyor belt, out of the factory of the mind. Manogatan means the mind's always going. In fact, even when you go to sleep at night, the mind is still going. You park your body, basically, but the mind still works. That's what manogatan. Mano means mind, and gatan means it's going. It's always going. So a person who has reached this level of what may be cliche to say self-realization or insightfulness, which takes one to a position where one can actually process stress in such a way that it doesn't lock into the physical parts of our body and become destructive to us, is able to notice that the mind is doing this, is producing all these things, and then doesn't participate. The products are there, they're coming off the conveyor belt, but prajahati, the person is able to not involve him or herself or grab onto those things that are coming. Then, where does one go? There's this idea, I'm in the world, there's things happening, I have desires, there's things to look at, I'm involved, so what do I do then? So the verse then says, Atman yevatmana tushta. So tushta, please say it's a nice word, tushta. I have a friend named Tushta. Tushta means satisfaction. It sounds like that too, doesn't it? It's almost onomatopoeic. Tushta. Atman yivatmana tushta. So atmani means by the self. And remember, what did I describe as the self according to the Bhagavad Gita? The Atma, correct, yes. And the Atma is actually, remarkably, it has really nothing to do ultimately with the lower energy. It's just kind of hanging out here, and it can participate or not participate. So Atmani, Atmana, means that the Atma itself becomes aware of itself, and in its awareness of itself, beyond the machinations of the mind, is able to find satisfaction within. Who's ever heard this phrase that happiness comes from within? You better all raise your hand. Happiness comes from within. Yeah, it's cliche also, but how does one find it? This verse says that the person actually becomes, and it's a simple thing, aware of his or her own self. Conscious of one's consciousness. Now here's the tricky part. The Atma is light. it's a superior light energy. It's consciousness. Conscious energy is remarkable. In fact, you can't circumscribe consciousness with a mathematical equation. It defies physics. And so now that's what's illuminating the body. And it also illuminates the mind. So when the mind becomes illuminated by that, there's a way in which the Atma doubles back and starts becoming absorbed in the mind and thinking that I am the mind. And therefore, every product that the mind is putting out, it becomes either a cause of happiness or distress. So the person who's able to step beyond that process of accepting the mind as the self, and actually, and then this can't be theoretical, you actually have to experience it for yourself, become aware of your own existence, your own conscious existence, which doesn't have anything to do with the mind. And that person, Atmanyevatmana tushta, that finds satisfaction there, stita pragnastadocite. Tara uchite means that person is called a person who's insightful, or has attained a modicum of self-realization, which is the place where one can step beyond the stress of this world, because it happens from an inner level. It's nothing that I can do externally to arrange my environment so they'll be stress-free, although that's not a bad idea to try. I mean, I got a do not disturb sign that I take with me wherever I travel, and it does wonders to help reduce stress and so forth. But ultimately, one has to experience it for oneself. So now, in my interactions and speaking, I always take reflections. Reflection is not a question. Those will come later. Questions have a hook on them, and that pulls me in a certain direction. I have to answer them. I'll do that near the end. But for now, reflection just means anything you heard, a concept, phrase that stuck with you even a little bit, that you can put back for all of us to amplify the concepts. What did you hear? That's basically the question. What did you hear? Give me back one thing that you heard. And we have a track star over here that is ready to bring you the microphone so that everyone can hear. Are you ready? Don't get stressed by this. Because right afterwards, we're going to have a nice meditation. You can close your eyes and everything. Yes?
So, this resonates a lot with whenever I talk to my mom. So, whenever something bad happens, I go and talk to my mom, and she usually helps me put things in perspective. So one thing that she always says, if say a paper that I wrote is not accepted, she says, okay, but what has changed in your life? You know, how is your life different because of this, in this moment? And I answer, well, nothing has actually changed. You know, I'm still here in Stanford, surrounded by nature. It's a nice day. And I think this resonates a lot with just what you were describing about how we identify with things. Let's say I'm identifying with the acceptance of this paper, but actually that's not who I am. That doesn't define me.
This is a very helpful, practical example of being insightful in the moment and recentering, looking back within. And what you're describing really is seeing the difference between my life and my life situation. Am I alive right now? Am I conscious? Yes, I am. And are things going on around me? Yes, they are. But there's a difference between the two. Thank you. And thanks to your mom, too. Two more.
Stressful week, and I asked my sister for some advice and help, and she has a lot of social anxiety, and recently started seeing a therapist, and her therapist recommended if she's feeling feeling overwhelmed, go outside and count the trees or count the clouds or anything to like take your mind off of whatever it is that's bothering you. But I think that's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on it, unlike the recommendation that you gave of your mind picking which boxes to take off the conveyor belt and process, because that's more of an active like change of thought processing instead of just distracting yourself by trees and clouds or whatever you can count.
Yes, thanks for making that point. I did mention also that rearranging your environment can help as well. I agree with you that ultimately the solution is something that we deal with inwardly through having our own personal experience of who we are and seeing the difference between who we are and what's going on around us. What we are is much more important than what we have. What we have actually is on loan, and it comes and goes. But what we are is something that never changes. And this is the experience mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita of meditation where one's able to see oneself. However, there is a way in which the mind, we're participating with the mind. And this is an important point the Bhagavad Gita makes, is the mind can be one's best friend or one's worst enemy. The mind also can be helpful in seeing the self. So the mind is compared to a mirror. And if you look in a mirror that's dirty, you might think I'm dirty. In fact, this happened to me on an airplane. I woke up, it was a long flight, and I went to use the restroom, and the mirror was imperfect. When I looked into it, I saw a distortion in my face, and I thought, this is horrible. I mean, probably the way my head was on the seat, and you know, I'm a monster. How am I gonna, you know, if I go to speak, everyone's gonna say, what happened to your head? And then, you know, because this was in a half sleeping state, and I moved a little bit to the left, and then I saw, oh, it was the mirror. And my head is the same as it was before, but the mirror distorted it. So when the mind is not properly aligned, or when it has a certain quality, it can distort the way I see the world. So the very foundational points for any self-help is it's not what happens to us in life that matters, it's what we think what happens to us in life that actually affects us. It's how we're interpreting. And the mind is an interpretive device. And therefore, and this goes into a little more technical knowledge, but the Bhagavad Gita talks about how we're all affected by three modalities in this world. One of them is called tamas, which relates to inertia. I mean, have you ever been in a state where you know, you had to clean up your room, and all it took to start was picking up one sock off the ground, but you couldn't move that far? I mean, you couldn't get from here to there? That's called tamas, inertia. And then above that is action, which is called rajas, where you're moving. And in fact, the description in the Bhagavad Gita of rajas is that basically too much is not enough. And that no matter what you get, there's always the next thing. And you know, the typical description of this is the hamster wheel, where the hamster's running, never, always eager to go another step further, but what is there? And then the purer and considered the highest modality in the world is called sattva, and its quality is lucidity. It actually gives us clarity, and it helps us to see ourselves as we are. So the mirror of the mind is not as distorted in sattva as it is in rajas and tamas. And therefore, it's, you know, looking at a tree and going out, typically nature scenes are more in sattva. And when you go out into that, you know, like if you've ever taken a break and you've gone to, you know, a natural setting, like, has anybody done that before? Yeah, thank you. You're in California, right? Yeah, I like go to Yosemite or something and spend some time, you know, by a brook. Your mind becomes a little less influenced by rajas and tamas and more in sattva, and so it could help to some degree to help mold us. And there are ways in which our lifestyle choices affect the way the mind works and the way it takes information from our environment, and interpretation is really what causes us problems. because we're all seeing the same stuff. We're taking in this information, but then I'm interpreting it. So the Bhagavad Gita will tell us that the mind, when it's in one of these modalities, will interpret the world according to its state at that time. So having some lifestyle changes which puts the mind into the sattva realm, which is more lucid, can be very helpful in avoiding stress also. So some kudos to your sister's advisor, medical advisor, right? Was there one more? Yes, please.
Hi, thank you. I like the, like when you said that we are to recognize that we are in this world and that we have desires and that we're involved in all these material world. And I guess it's kind of like I took it in as acceptance of the fact that we are not as powerful as we think we are, like when trying to control what's happening around us.
Oh, yeah.
And I think many times we are even judging ourselves for feeling stressed, for feeling very emotional, for feeling just like we are judging our own feelings. And I think that acceptance of that can go a long way.
Yes, this is an excellent point. Thank you for making that point. Just a couple of responses that I'd like to make. One is your point about how we're not as powerful as we think. And this is a constant theme in the Bhagavad Gita. And actually, it's helpful to recognize that I can't control the world and that it's going to move on without me. It's one of the ways, just very practically, to avoid stress, is don't think or insist that your plan always has to work, and be flexible. I mean, this is commonsensical advice, isn't it? Yeah. And so that was one point. The other point was excellent. I'm trying to remember. You said... Yeah, kind of an acceptance of the fact that we do have emotions, we're moving through the world, and the response that I had in mind slipped out of my mind. And it's around here somewhere, but I know it'll come back around. But, pardon me?
We don't have to judge ourselves for our emotions.
Yeah. Still not aligned. So let's go to the meditation part of our program and see if I can get it back. So what I'm going to ask you to do here is just notice the mind-body connection. Because this can be very, very helpful at any time during your day or night if you remember where you are, who you are, and sort of align yourself, be introspective, and remember who you are. So this meditation will take us to a place where we can see the difference between the body and the Atma. That's what it's meant to do. Help us do that. Now, to get started, one thing is if you sit up a little straighter than you were just a second ago, you'll notice that the energy starts to move towards paying attention. And this is true even in interviews. If you go for an interview for a job or something like that and you sit like this, they'll think you're not really serious. But if you just sit 2 inches straighter than you were before, they think you're interested and interesting. And similarly, when you sit up a little straighter, your mind will start taking it seriously. But this is something important that's about to happen. And we'll start off, if you'll kindly close your eyes.
Battery 100%. Connected to iPhone.
Find a comfortable position and bring yourself to the present. With your eyes closed, let your thoughts and emotions come and go. without judging them. Focus on your breathing. Inhale deeply, and then exhale deeply. Help yourself to concentrate on your breath by mentally saying in on the inhalations and out on the exhalations. If your mind wanders, bring it back to your breath. Now bring your attention to your heart space. Imagine as you inhale that you're breathing a golden light into your heart. As you breathe out, the golden light fills the room around you. Breathe in soft golden energy. Your heart is warm and open. Breathe out and release all tensions. Relax. You're on a beach, close to the ocean, but not touching it. It's a beautiful sunny day. The air is fresh. The sand is a brilliant white, and the sky a clear blue. The sun pleasantly warms your skin, and you can hear the waves lapping. The water is now bathing your feet. As it returns to the ocean, your feet become transparent. The next wave bathes your legs, and as it returns to its source, your legs too become transparent. Now the water is flowing up over your hips to your navel. As the water returns to the ocean, your body is transparent from the navel down. The next wave bathes you up to your neck. The water is soothing. You feel safe. As the wave pulls back, your whole body is transparent. The next wave flows over your head. You have no trouble breathing, and you're very relaxed. As the water returns to the ocean, your whole body is transparent. You can no longer see it. There's only you, the real you, who is free from all coverings, who is separate from the body, and who is the witness to all the life situations that surround you. Please take a moment to notice that you exist. Be consciously aware of your consciousness. Notice that you're alive. Notice that your life is different from your life situation. Please remain in this space and listen to a text from Yoga Wisdom. As the sun alone illuminates all this universe, so does the living entity, one within the body, illuminate the entire body by consciousness. Those who see with eyes of knowledge the difference between the body and the knower of the body can attain true happiness. Bring your consciousness back to your breath. Put your palms together and make a little friction. Bring the energy back into your body. And then slowly open your eyes and come back into the room. So, from wherever we are, we can introspect. And it's not an unusual request to make of oneself, to look inwardly. But it's very effective because there's a way in which we're always present, and we always have the same quality that we can draw upon to find balance and to be able to properly interpret the things that are going on around us in our life. It's easy to miss and to get completely caught up in the life situation. Just yesterday I was standing in a store and I saw an elderly couple walking down the street. And just as they walked in front of the store window, it was a time of day when there was some reflected light on it, so it might have been hard to see what was inside the store. But as the gentleman walked past, he looked in the window, and I thought at first he was looking at me. But then I noticed that he wasn't looking at me at all. He was actually looking at himself in the mirror. I noticed that he was getting old. I mean, I am too, but I noticed that, you know, his hair, of course mine's gone too, but he was trying to adjust his hair, and I just got that feeling that he was self-conscious for a moment in the mirror that was the window, and that he was thinking, you know, like, can I arrange this and get it to work? And I was thinking, it's not going to work. Of course, I thought that a long time ago. That's why I shaved off my hair when I was a monk. So, but then I had this kind of existential experience there. But I was thinking how that window is there. But if we're not able to see it, we just see ourselves, and we're thinking how to adjust our life situation, then we miss what's actually inside. There's a consciousness within us that's fascinating, that's endlessly nourishing, that we can connect with. But we have to look beyond just the reflection of ourselves that we're seeing in the mirror. And even the body that we see when we look in the mirror is not really us. It's a temporary vehicle that we're traveling in. And from the practice of introspection, which can be helped in various ways through lifestyle, there are lifestyle adjustments one can make. There are also practices of meditation that one can do every day that are very helpful. In many of the places around the Bay Area where we do these kinds of seminars regularly, we have meditation clubs where people come together, they regularly practice and help each other to stay consistent in the practice, and they're finding this to be very helpful in many, many different ways. So the art of finding that balance by looking within and adjusting one's lifestyle in various ways is questions. Especially think of ways in which you can help to illuminate any of the points that were made, or if you weren't clear on any of the things that I said or think that they needed more explanation, try to bring something up. So it means either reflection or a question. So reflections are easy because it just means to right in the back. Keep your hand up and Vrindavan will notice you. There you are.
Thank you. I was just reflecting on some things you mentioned and about mostly about identifying it, self-identifying those things that we produce, and also the real life situations. Over the past few years, a lot of things have happened, and looking back when it happened, all the story that I ran with, I just, 5 years later looking back, it just seems like most of them did not come true, and those that came
the top, and the flower and the leaf hovers at the top, and it does get submerged sometimes, but it has a particular quality that it never actually absorbs the water. It has some way in which, if you look at it, you'll notice the water's all beating up, and it really makes sense, the analogy that's in the Bhagavad Gita, and that is the advice that you should live in the world the way a lotus does. That is, you're in it, but you're not being touched by it. And that's the art. So the way that one's not touched by it starts from an internal level. And it means that even as you're working and doing things in the world, and you can be expressing yourself in many different ways and working in different ways, but internally you're doing it as a dedication, as a service, rather than being attached to the results of it. And this is the fulcrum of the power in yoga, the intentionality behind why you're doing something. If you're doing it for service and you're not attached to the results, it gives you immense power when you're doing it. It also allows you to remain detached from it, because as we mentioned earlier, the stress and anxiety I'm feeling in the world is because of my identification. I'm saying it's mine. I'm the controller, and also I own this, and therefore I become caught up in it. So this practice is called karma yoga, that I'm working. Karma means to work. It means to move. It comes from the root word kri in Sanskrit, which means action. So I'm working, I'm active, I can't stop, but my intention is different in my heart. So if you're serving selflessly and you're doing it as a dedication for a higher purpose, you may look like you're doing the same thing physically side by side with somebody else, but you're like the lotus, you're not being touched by it internally. Yes?
So I have a question.
Okay.
We all have a body, and like we reside in this body. Like
Keep it close.
I'm residing in this body.
Yes.
So my body will affect me if I don't have money to buy food or to buy a house or something. Those material things do affect us.
Yes.
So how do we maintain a balance that, yes, we are going to get the material things, like we are going to work to earn money, and also keep peace of mind that, not worry about will there be enough money or will I be comfortable?
Such a good point. Yeah, this is very important because we can't simply deny the fact that we have two levels of existence. And in the teachings of yoga and meditation, this is called our vyavaharika existence and our paramartika existence. So vyavaharika means that we have practical duties to do in the world. Of course, we saw squirrels on the way in here, and I commented that they don't pay any insurance. I mean, they're just hanging out. So there is a way in which, especially if we're not living in a very artificial kind of an environment, and nowadays, I mean, why do people have to pay so much for health insurance and things like that? It becomes very artificial having to work in certain ways. But the vyavaharika is a fact. It means that we have ways that we have to move in the world and practically understand that there's a world, although it's changing, it's real, and you have to deal with it in certain ways. As an example, if you go for a job interview, bring that one up again, and you sit down and they say, "Where are you from?" and you say, "I'm from the spiritual world. I have nothing to do with this world." They'll immediately pass because they think, So but a person operating on a vyavaharika level will go in for the interview, will present the credentials to the best of his or her ability and say, this is what I can do for you, knowing that I actually have to have an apartment to live in order to have a basis, a foundation for the rest of my life. So, which would, if I'm saying it's a yogi, that person is thinking, my main thing is paramartika, how to advance spiritually. And so this is a verse given in one of the bhakti literatures. It says, Kamasya nendriya pritir labo jiveti yavata, jivasya tattva jignasya narto yash cheha karmabhi. It means basically that eat to live, don't live to eat. It's saying that live on the vyavaharika level in a practical way, in a way that is not gluttonous. In fact, it's an admonition. Atyahara, it's one of the principles of yoga. That's called extreme eating or extreme collecting. There's a lot of things we collect and we eat that we don't need. And so live on that level in a balanced way so you don't cause a lot of disturbance. You have a right to do that, to live a healthy life. But do it so that you have full vigor for inquiring about your higher self, because that's really what the yoga literatures are saying. The human body is especially designed for that. It's not designed for overeating and over-collecting. In fact, sociological studies say that after a certain amount of income, you're not really getting much more pleasure out of it. I mean, what's the difference between 1 billion and 2 billion, or even 250,000 and 1 million? After a while, when you've covered the basic, the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's needs, when you've covered a certain level, it's not really bringing you any more happiness. So what the yoga literature is saying, that find where you're balanced there, get what you need to have, and then use that as a springboard so you can fully inquire and go deeper into your life. It's very practical. Does that help? All right. So yes, this will be our last, because we've come to the end, isn't it? Yes. Yes, what is your... Jack. Jack helped us so much to set up this room. And if you're appreciating the beautiful arc of the chairs and the way that's Jack. He designed that. That's a big deal. It's kind of like you don't know it, you just know there's something right, but you don't know why it's right. But there's always a person behind it somewhere. There's a designer. So Jack's it. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, in thinking on the concept of identifying with thoughts and objects in the world, and especially the negative things that happen to us, I kind of thought of the famous saying, "This too shall pass." I can't remember who said it. Maybe someone here knows. Who? You did. And so it's been reassuring to me in difficult times, some negative thing that is happening, it's only in this present moment. There will be a future present where it's no longer relevant. But there's kind of a flip side to it where the good things that are happening to us, these two are just transitory.
Yeah.
In psychology, there's distress, and then there's also the concept of eustress, which is a positive, beneficial stress where we're engaged in some activity, be it a sport or just writing or something, just when we're engaged in something and we're having a very positive experience from it. And so, I guess I was just thinking, how is it that we should deal with the eustress in our life? Because I think the positive effects, it feels good, we like to be engaged in something, enjoying something, but with the logic that you presented, is there something that is more meaningful that we should be focused on rather than just some positive experience that we're having in the moment?
Well, what a profound question to answer in 30 seconds. Let me just address very quickly, because we're at the end of our time, a couple of the excellent points that you made. One of them is about tolerance. And this is one of the main points that comes up in the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, a famous verse from the Bhagavad Gita says, Matra sparshasta konteya shitoshna sukadukata agama paino nityas tams titikshashva bharata. Titiksha means to tolerate. And what Krishna is describing there is the fact that everything comes and goes like winter and summer seasons. And this idea of happiness and distress, it's also created in the mind. For one person, the heat is very nice. For another person, it's punishing and difficult to deal with. Or let's say the example is often given is, cold water is very nice in the summer, but in the wintertime it's very difficult. In fact, in some of the places I stay in India, these sadhus, holy people, they in the cold wintertime, they always take their bath early. I see them early in the morning, 4 a.m., and they're taking a freezing cold bath, But they just do it whether it's winter or summer. But you can just say, in the winter, it feels bad, and in the summer, it feels good. You can go about adjusting your environment continually to try to get it just so it will fit, but it never quite does. And therefore, those who are wise, they simply tolerate many things that happen because, as you say, they're coming and going. And whether something's good or bad, from the platform of the changing material world, it's all passing by, and it's your interpretation whether it's good or bad, ultimately. So, I just came from Japan, and in the April season, it's cherry blossom time. The whole country is awash in cherry blossoms. So there's this Shinto and Buddhist kind of celebration spirit that they have there of celebrating. What they're actually celebrating is the transitoriness of beauty in nature. As the cherry blossoms are stunningly beautiful, and you can sit underneath them, but then a wind comes, and the next day they're all gone. And so there's this sort of lament that's always there. It's so beautiful, it's so nice, but it'll be gone any minute now. So, not to get too far down this road, because it becomes very philosophical, we don't have any more time. But the point is that, and I'll leave on this note, that the Bhagavad Gita and other bhakti literatures, yoga literature, consider this world as a reflection of reality. I'm looking at a reflection. Therefore, beauty is there, happiness is there, but it's coming from another source. So we can't find the happiness, which includes some sense of permanence, in the reflection. It's not there. However, we can find the original source that it comes from. And that's the stuff of yoga. And that's the objective, is actually finding that. It's available, and actually, remarkably, stunningly, you can find it by looking inwardly. You can actually experience it for yourself. So, we came together here. Hopefully we did a little damage. to the stress in the world, and we can take away a few things. I thank you very much. You've been a really, really nice audience, and I feel really honored to have been here with you for an hour. Now back over to Sundar.
Natcheri Armarman, Natcheri Armarman, Natcheri Armarman, Natcheri Armarman, hey, Natcheri Armarman, Natcheri Armarman, Natcheri Armarman, Natcheri Armarman.